Welcome to AZNHA's July education session. I'm Laurel Smith, an AZNHA board director and chair of the education committee. Thank you for joining us today. We've just been talking about the heat, and we have to stop that and go on to more important things because it is what it is. A couple of announcements about today. Just a reminder about our August 25th conference. The Eventbrite registration page is ready to go, and you can get that link from our website homepage. We hope to see you there. During this session, you will all be muted to avoid noise disruptions. We have a Q&A session at the end of the main presentation, and you may send your questions at any time using the Zoom chat function, or you can hold them until we open it up at the end for Q&A. At that time that we will unmute everyone. We're recording this session and it will be posted on our website for future reference. First off, I'd like to introduce you to Sean and Jill Charles of Oasis Senior Advisors. I'm going to try to say that smoother next time. Oasis is a senior placement company, and Sean is one of our newest associate members. We welcome you, Sean. Please give us a brief overview of what you do.
Okay, here we come. Let's see.
Okay.
Share. We had it done before, so play. Okay. One more, baby. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay.
So, can everyone still see us pretty good?
Yep.
PowerPoint. Okay. So, Sean and Jill Charles. I've been working Oasis Senior Advisor, South and East Valley for over 5 years. My wife came on board in January full time. We extended our territory, and that's why we have the South part of it now to our part of our company. We help families and seniors on a day-to-day basis find senior housing. You want to tell them anything about us?
We're newly empty nesters. We have both of our boys in college, our oldest at Stanford, our youngest playing soccer for UC Davis. So it's a good time for us to be jumping into this business together. And yeah, we're really enjoying it.
Okay. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of walk everyone through what we kind of do on our end to help our clients find the right independent living, assisted living, and memory care environment to transition into. So,
okay. And this is a free service to the family. We do a face-to-face consultation with the family, unless that's not, doable. But we like to provide that personal touch to the family. We really care. We like to come when that's that overwhelming. A lot of times it's the in-home care has been taking care of them, and maybe it gets to that point where they just need to make that transition. So we kind of hold their hand along that way. We are HIPAA compliant. We don't share the contact information about our families with our referral partner communities and residential care homes. They do get a listing of our clients' ADLs so that they know, what, kind of a little brief overview about our client, but that's, the extent of it. Sean is a certified also senior advisor, also dementia. He's a dementia practitioner. Mm-hmm. Right.
So the one thing that really separates us a lot from other companies, especially A Place for Mom, is that we do not share our clients' contact information. Everything we do is to walk them and hold their hand throughout the whole process. So we don't just have them getting bombarded with a bunch of phone calls and emails from different communities. We actually walk them through that process. So transitioning coordination services. So we like to think of ourselves as more than just a placement company. We are one call, many solutions. We have clients that call us up for non-medical in-home care, for realtors, for movers, there's so many different things that we get phone calls for. And so we have referral partners across the board in the senior industry, and we actually make sure that we get our referral partners to help out our clients. We'd rather them talk to a person that we refer them to, than pick up the phone or go online and try to find the services on their own, because they can walk into a situation where they can have
Be
fraud,
taken advantage of.
be
Yeah.
taken advantage of, and things like that. So we have a proprietary software system, and that's really what separates us. Another thing that really separates us from other placement companies is we gather a bunch of information. I mean, all the way down from weight and age, weight and height. You know, some people are like, well, why do you need to know that? Well, in case you were to fall down, we need to make sure there's enough staffing there to pick you up. Or, you know, if you are a Hoyer lift, some places don't accept a Hoyer, a person over 250 pounds, because they don't use Hoyer lifts in those environments. So we don't want to waste our clients' time nor our time. So we make sure we it's kind of like Match.com. We're asking a lot of questions and we're matching them up with the communities or homes that are going to fit their budget, lifestyle, and their ADLs. This is kind of giving you a little snapshot of what we do and kind of some of the information we try to collect from our clients. And the more we can get from them, the better it's going to be as far as matching them up on the back end of our system. And then here you can see when we go through our ADLs, we do go through a lot of different checkpoints and stuff like that, especially when we get to a client that has or shows signs of dementia. We want to make sure that, you know, most clients are saying they want assisted living, but as we're communicating with the representative, if they're talking about them wandering at night or up all night and you know, maybe even being verbally combative, that might be a sign of dementia. That's not going to go into assisted living. That person is going to be looking more for a memory care environment. So really what we're doing is we're asking questions and getting enough information so we can actually try to transition them into the right spot.
And taking lots of notes during that intake also.
Yeah. And then it comes to the room and pricing. If you take a look over on the right where you see my mouse moving, we take their budget. So they're telling us exactly what they can afford to spend. And then they're telling us what size room in the middle. And then they're telling us what type of environment they're looking at. And with that, our system is then calculating all these things, and it's going to then shoot out to us places that fit our client's profile. So you'll see that next. So you can see we can put in the zip code that they want to be in. We got a 10-mile range, and then 41 communities popped up. So when those communities pop up, my wife and I will then be able to take a look at them because we've been to those places, toured with them professionally, and we can identify which ones from our conversation with our clients, which ones are going to be the best fit. And then we end up turning around and we send them an email so they can look at the pictures, amenities, and services of the places that fit their profile.
We typically send about 8. Yeah. I'd say that we come up with based on all the criteria for them to then go through the pictures, amenities, services.
Yep. And we'd like them to limit it down to 2 to 3 places. We will not tour more than 3 places with a client in one day. It gets overwhelming for them. It's a lot of work. So we don't do more than 3. And so with the information we give them, we're hoping that in those 2 to 3 places that they choose, one of them is going to be the perfect fit. And we actually tour with our clients. And a lot of times here in Arizona, because their kids aren't here, we actually will pick our clients up because we're insured to do that, and we'll take them on the tours as well. And then this is something that really is a helpful thing for us, because this allows us to send out referrals to our clients. So someone calls us up and they're like, mom's not ready for placement. We'd like to get someone with non-medical and home care. So we just go through our database of lead sources. We connect them, and you can see we electronically send both of them simultaneously an e-introduction to one another to set up an opportunity to conversate about what it's going to cost for them to come in and do in-home care, or what it's going to cost for the movers to show up and pack up their stuff. So, I mean, we really consider ourselves to be a one-stop shop for seniors. One very important thing is we help all clients. A senior placement, we do not get compensated for anyone that's on state funding or Medicaid, all techs here in Arizona, but we still help those clients no differently than we do a private play client. Actually finding state funding beds is actually very hard to do because there's not very many of them out there, but we have a database that allows us to isolate just those beds so we can help our clients that are already on state funding find places that are gonna accept their insurance. Let's see. So one of our big thing is our process of educating families. I coached Division I wrestling for over 20 years, and a lot of people are always like, how do you go from coaching, to doing what I do now as far as senior placement? And it's very much the same. Recruiting is basically educating families on what you can offer their kid when they come to school. Well, what I do every day is I educate families on what opportunities or possibilities are out there for as they're transitioning from hospital or skilled nursing or home to an assisted living environment or memory care. So I just try to give them as much information as I can and make sure that we're there throughout the whole process, answering any questions they have along the way. So that's that. Does anyone have any questions for us?
Oh, there's a chat.
Okay, let me see. I'm sorry, let me get back to where we were at so we can see the chat.
I don't see any in the chat, Sean.
Okay, I see one thing.
Oh, computer. Somebody had computer issues.
Okay. And so we own a franchise and we own 2 territories. We're the only franchise owners here in Arizona other than in Prescott. So we work the whole valley, right? But we specialize in the South and East Valley of Arizona.
Great. Thank you very much, Jill and Sean, for being with us today. It's always an emotional and stressful time when deciding to relocate loved ones to assisted living centers, and having the, I'm going to call it the detail and the hand-holding that you two do brings, I'm sure, comfort to a lot of people, and it helps to make their journey as smooth as possible, having that one-on-one relationship. So thank you very much for what you do and for being here, and thank you for being our newer associate member.
All right, and thank you guys for letting us present ourselves
and
so much. Educate everybody about what we do. Really appreciate that.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Thanks. Everybody
so today, I'm sorry, Jill?
No, just everybody have a great rest of your day.
Okay, thank you. And you're welcome to stay on if you'd like for the presentation.
Perfect.
Our featured presenter speaker today is Latisha Balogh-Robinson, who is an RN in New York State and an associate instructor for Verbal Judo Institute. Not only does her company name kind of fascinate me, but also the name of her presentation. So I'm looking forward to this, Sink or Swim. And I'm going to guess that Latisha, you know how to swim during this. So taking
I know how to swim verbally, but actually physically swimming, I sink like a rock.
So taking a proactive stance, verbal de-escalation in healthcare. Latisha, the Zoom screen is now yours. Thank you.
Okay, so let me go ahead and see if I can do this. Put that up there, and I think I am sharing. Tell me if I'm sharing.
Yes, you are.
Can you see me? Awesome. So again, thank you so much, Laura and Linda, for inviting me. I did want to join you guys at your conference this year, but I did have a competing priority or a competing client that I needed to take care of. But I'm thrilled to be here today. As Laura said, that I am a New York nurse, been a nurse for a very, very long time, and an independent contractor and an associate instructor for the Verbal Judo Institute. So today, Laurel, you asked me to share with you guys why the de-escalating training industry is needed at all, and what value it brings to the non-medical home care industry, and how will it benefit your members, how will it benefit your clients, and what to look for when choosing programs and what to look out for. The why and the what I will address by telling my story and sharing some statistics. The benefits of what to consider when choosing a program, I will address at the end of the presentation through some other information slides. And time permitted, I will be happy to answer any questions. But before I jump into my story, I want to learn a little bit about you, and I hope you guys are willing to participate in chat. I'm going to ask a few questions. So if you can kindly put in chat, let me find my chat box. There we go. The first question I'm going to ask is, how many people feel that they are naturally good at dealing with conflict and de-escalation? Say yes or no. Type in chat. Do you feel like you're a natural? I got at least one no. Yeah. So we have some people who are naturals at it, but by and large, most of us are don't do conflict very well. My next question to you guys is, I see some more no's and some more yeses. Does your organization provide mandatory or required de-escalating training during your new employee orientation onboarding? Yes or no? Yeah. Yeah, so we're not being, getting ahead of the game by providing this type of training before you actually go into the workforce. Okay, so no. The next one, of those who said no, does your organization offer any other form of de-escalation training? Okay. So it looks like we have the no's have it. And last, have you independently attended a verbal de-escalation training or class yourself? Have you sought one out to attend? Okay. So I have, thank you for answering these questions, Brenda. Thank you for that you actually took a class. That's great. I do have some thoughts about these, the questions I'm asking you and the answers. And so the first one, when I asked how many people feel that they're naturally good at dealing with conflict, and as much as I hate conflict and dealing with conflict, I'm actually one of those people who are naturals at it. But even if you're naturally good at dealing with conflict, I like to think of it as a superpower that you don't have control over. You don't know why it works. And when you succeed really, really well. But if you don't succeed, you step into it. You step in it with both feet. We leave success and failure pretty much up to chance, and you hope for success, and hope is not a plan. So my thoughts on this is, even if you're good, taking a de-escalation course and understanding why things work gives you better control over your outcomes. And it also helps you be able to articulate to the people that you are trying to train and onboard into your organization. So I mean, if I don't know what I'm doing and why it works, I can't teach somebody else. So by understanding why things work, you can do it with more reliability, and you can have better outcomes and across the board. Now, does your organization provide mandatory de-escalation training? By and large, most organizations do not. From my perspective, it's like, my big question is, how can we hold ourselves or somebody else accountable to a standard of communication that we have not defined or given the tools to be able to do and succeed? We make the mistake of assuming that people have good communication skills. And then, we try to do damage control when we find out the hard way that they don't. And the other problem is that we have whole generations of people coming into the workforce who grew up in a mediated environment. And it's really, really difficult because these folks have not had the, a lot of their communication is asynchronous. It's text messages and IMs and so on and so forth. So when it comes to that face-to-face communication, some people don't have the experience or the skill. So, it's really, unfortunate that we assume that people have the skills and we don't proactively and preemptively provide it. Unfortunately, in healthcare in general, soft skill training is not something that we prioritize. And I would argue that we really need to do that, because most of what we do in healthcare and in the caring industries is communicate with people. And if we're not good communicators, we're really, really hobbling ourselves to be able to succeed. So if you've attended a verbal de-escalation class in the past, that is awesome. So thank you so much, Brenda, that you said that you attended a class. My recommendation is that even if you've taken a class in the past, whenever you have an opportunity, take it again and take it again. In all my years in healthcare, and I'll give you a little bit about myself in a second, I've had opportunities to take multiple EKG courses and multiple ABG courses, and I was very, very good at those things. But every time I had an opportunity, I would take the class again. And every time I walked away with a deeper understanding of that concept. So verbal communication and de-escalation training is very much the same thing. You take it again, you come away with a deeper understanding. And every time you have an opportunity, I do recommend that you avail yourself of it. So just a little bit about myself. I've been in healthcare for extremely long time. I've been in there since 1986. I started as a CNA. I'm going to tell a little story about that in a second. But very early in my healthcare career, I realized that the root of a lot of our problems in healthcare when you actually distill it down to its essence, at the center of it, typically there's an element of communication issues. So when it came to that time in my career where I had the crossroads in my career where I had to decide where I wanted to take all my advanced degree work, I chose, instead of getting my bachelor's in nursing or my master's in nursing or my nurse practitioner, I actually chose to pursue communication. So all my advanced degree work is in communication. And when you take courses like this in leadership and communication, they tell you, well, identify your weakness and work on it. And even though I feel like I'm a natural at conflict, I hate conflict and I try to avoid conflict at all costs. So I really chose to focus all my advanced degree work on conflict and persuasion. So a little bit about my story. I started as a nursing assistant back in 1986, right around the time when a lot of the inpatient psychiatric centers were closing their doors and discharging their patients either to the communities. And folks that were elderly and had a lot of other physical care issues got transferred to nursing homes. So within just a short few months of me getting my very first job in a nursing home as a CNA, my patients went from being, folks that had dementia issues, memory issues, some self-care issues, to being people who had all those issues, but also had some very serious psychiatric comorbidities. And I didn't get any training. It was really sink or swim. You had to, you learned how to bob and weave really good, and you either survived or you didn't survive. And it was unfortunate. I remember some of my colleagues who left the profession because of the stress of being verbally and physically attacked by people. So it was very much a sink or swim situation. And fortunately, even though I can't swim in the real world in a swimming pool, I can swim verbally, and I did pretty good. Fast forward to the 90s, I became a nurse, an RN. And just type in chat yes or no. Does anybody ever hear of the saying that nurses eat their young? Anybody hear that saying? Oh, absolutely. I like to think that things are better now, but typically nurses do eat their young. So not only as a brand new baby nurse did I have to deal with patients who may be, of not cognitively capable of controlling themselves and so on. I also had to deal with the duress and the aggression that was going on by that horizontal violence that I was experiencing as a brand new nurse. Again, in nursing school, we did not get any training in that other than use some eye phrasing and so on and so forth, sit at eye level and stuff like that. But we really didn't get any real training, and again, it was sink or swim. And luckily, I was able to succeed. Now, fast forward to when I became a nurse manager. Again, no training. And this time, the people I were dealing with was my staff. And when I succeeded very, very well. But when I stepped in it with both feet. By the time I became a director of patient experience, I had my master's of communication. I realized, that this was a real problem. And I was determined not to have my staff, my guest services staff, get thrown into the deep end of the pool without some swimmies. So I found the verbal judo program. It resonated with my all my academic work, and so that's when I became a verbal judo instructor back in 2016. And then since then, I started teaching verbal judo as an independent contractor. As an independent contractor, I have had an opportunity to teach verbal de-escalation across the country, and sadly, what I've learned over the last couple of years is that my story is not isolated. It's not unique. And even after all these years of me being in healthcare, some things are just still the same. We still are very reactionary when we provide training. We wait until there's a problem before we provide remediation. And my goal and my purpose in teaching verbal de-escalation across the country is to try to get ahead of the problem, give people the tools, the communication tools before they get into the situation so they can successfully navigate it, and that it can be a win-win situation, not only for the person who's the caretaker, but also for the patient or the client themselves. So want to share a little bit of statistics about workplace violence in healthcare in general. And back in about 2015, I believe, 2016, the advisory board published a paper that was based on BLS statistics and so on and so forth, that said that 75% of workplace violence occurs in healthcare. So just wrap your head around that for a second. 75% of all workplace violence, that includes industry in general, just general industry and other jobs and so on. 75% of all workplace violence occurs in healthcare. But here was the shocker for me that really kind of like sobered me up a little bit. That while 75% of all workplace violence occurs in healthcare, healthcare only represents 9 to 11% of the workforce. And the other thing that was very sobering about this advisory board report was that it was very clear that people who work in the caring industries, the healthcare industry, tend to underreport these events. So the reality there is these numbers were very conservative numbers. The reason why I choose this picture here is it's not just the patient or the client and so on that we can experience that violence, the verbal violence through. It can also be our colleagues. We can, how we communicate with each other can be a problem as well. So this slide here is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It was published in 2020. It reflects 2018 stats that was collected up through 2018. And you can see that year over year, the incidence of non-fatal workplace violence has increased. So this trend, even with all the knowledge and recognition that workplace violence is an issue for healthcare workers, the plans that what we're trying to do really is not having a significant impact thus far. And here's another one that really shows the healthcare industries that's represented in red and other industries in total. And you can see year over year, the incidence of workplace violence, injuries, and illnesses and days away from work has steadily increased year over year over year, while the other industries have stayed pretty much stable over the last 3 or 4 years. This does not reflect the data since COVID. I couldn't find updated statistics for that yet. It takes a while for the government to sift through the stats. This is just a little comprehensive slide from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows the incidence of non-fatal injuries by people by actual job. Home health and non-medical home health is not represented on this slide, and I couldn't find the equivalent of this data set, but I did find on CDC that people who work in the home care environment, both medical and non-medical, experience verbal abuse. 18 to 65% experience verbal abuse. Sexual harassment, upwards of 41% of people who are working in the home care industry. Physical assault, upwards of 44% of people experience physical assault in the home care industry, and racial and ethnic discrimination. And unlike people who are working in the brick and mortar institutions like nursing homes and hospitals and such, people who work in the home environment also have to deal with pets, challenging family members that are in people's homes, firearms, and neighborhood violence. So I'm going to ask you if you can type in chat, do you feel that these numbers over here where my cursor is, the verbal abuse, physical assault, sexual harassment, do you feel that they're kind of on the mark, or do you think that they're low? Type either on the mark or low. Do you think these are conservative? Because my guess is that they're probably very conservative numbers. Yeah, and I would agree with you that these because we tend to underreport these types of events, I do believe that these numbers are very conservative. So in about 2015, 2016, OSHA published this paper, the guidelines for preventing workplace violence for healthcare and social workers. If you have not seen this paper, please look it up and give it a read. It's very, very comprehensive, has really, really good information in it. And it also includes information about folks who work in home care, in the home environment. And in this paper, OSHA posits this concept of the universal precautions for violence. And I really feel that this is so pivotal. This was like an aha moment for me when I actually came across this, this concept. And I've been working in healthcare for a long time, and until I read this paper was the first time I heard it. And as I teach this verbal de-escalation across the country, this is new information for many of them. So what OSHA posits is that just like we have universal precautions for infection control, where we assume that with every patient contact, there's the potential for infection, and we preemptively and proactively take measures to prevent that spread. What OSHA posits is that when people working in the world of healthcare and the caring industries, that we have to assume that the conditions for violence exists, and that we can mitigate that by through preparation and training and so on and so forth. In other words, we need to, instead of assuming that everybody is going to be nice and everything is going to be fine, and then we're surprised and taken off guard and triggered ourselves when they are not, we need to assume, we need to flip the paradigm, and we need to assume that just by the very nature of people being in the healthcare continuum, the conditions for violence exist, and we need to communicate with them in such a way that, number one, they don't escalate to begin with, and that and if we're doing this right, if they are already in an escalated state, we can de-escalate them. And this training program that that OSHA talks about is, and they talk about what are the elements of a good training program and such. And I'm very proud to say that Verbal Judo does check all their boxes. But they also say that a good training program has to be grounded in a foundation of a culture of respect and dignity. There has to be mutual engagement of the staff members to prevent workplace violence, and it can't be a one and done training. It's kind of like, I like to think of it as CPR for our mouths, because you just don't take CPR once and then say, I'm done, I'm an expert. You renew those skills every other year or so. And then the other thing is that we need to, the training program has to provide an opportunity for practice and role play. And but the big concept here is we need to flip that paradigm. Instead of assuming that people are going to be nice and are surprised when they're not, we need to assume that people in the healthcare continuum are under a lot of stress. They're scared, they're frightened, they're embarrassed. The list goes on. And when they're in an emotional state like that, they're more likely to get to a point where they're escalating, and verbal and physical violence can occur. So why does my industry exist? Why do we even need companies or services that provide de-escalation training? And my short answer is people. I'm known to say that people are people-y, and we're unpredictable, and human nature is unpredictable at its very nature. Stress levels are through the roof, and when you're in the healthcare continuum, by that, by virtue of just being in need of healthcare, there's a lot of stress involved. But then you add on to that, what we've been dealing with over the last few years with COVID and the fear and the anxiety that goes along with that. The other reason why this is important is that we typically are not very good at managing expectations, either the expectations of the people we're interacting with or even our own expectations. I mean, we expect that people are always going to be nice, and we're surprised when they're not. We need to manage our own expectations, but we also have to be better at managing other people's expectation. And people need, we're dealing with a population of folks that need help, and even from the medical and non-medical perspective, the people that we're dealing with when we're going into their homes, they feel very vulnerable. And also, and I mentioned it before, that as a result of the prevalence of mediated and asynchronized communication, the text messaging and so on and so forth, there's whole generations of our workforce that haven't had the opportunity to develop and hone their communication skills through face-to-face interactions, and COVID just made it worse. So again, we make the mistake of assuming that everyone has good communication skills, and then we are surprised when they don't. So that's why we exist. So how can de-escalation training bring, what value can de-escalation training bring to the in-home non-medical care industry? Well, number one, people have options when choosing home care services. There's always options. You know, I don't think there's a monopoly out there. And people choose their services a lot based on the reputation of that organization. How we communicate with the public and the communities that we serve and each other is the foundation of our professional reputation. If we communicate with that dignity and respect that I spoke of before, and having the skills that we need to be able to successfully navigate conflict and anxiety, that's the foundation of our professional reputation. You know, bad interactions are shared word of mouth and on social media. It only takes about 4 seconds for somebody to post something onto social media, and once it's out there, it's out there. Just take a look at Yelp, and you know, YouTube and so on. And when reputational damage happens, it's really hard, if not impossible, to unring that bell. So, you know, having a good de-escalation, people trained with good de-escalation skills, or even just good communication skills in general, it helps build trust with the communities that you serve, and it promotes well-being of the folks that you take care of. And all in all, it really makes you a more marketable entity. So how can de-escalation training benefit the AZNHA members? Well, number one, it keeps you safe. Any reputable, and there's a lot of different de-escalation training programs out there other than verbal judo. Any reputable program will put an emphasis on staff safety. Giving people the verbal tools to keep them safe is paramount. And physical violence is almost always preceded by verbal aggression. If we can manage that verbal aggression before it gets to the point where it escalates, where people are putting hands on you, we're going to keep you safe. And having the skills to successfully navigate and de-escalate verbal aggression will decrease the likelihood that it will actually escalate to people putting hands on you. So what should the consumer look for in a program? Oh, I'm sorry, I need to back up. I got a little click happy. How can it benefit your clients? It keeps them safe too. If you are good at communicating with folks, being good at de-escalating the tension that happens in the homes when you're taking care of folks, people are less likely to get themselves into situations or a position where they may have their services terminated because of their behavior. And we don't want that to happen. They need your service for a reason, and we want to make sure that they get the care and the support that they need. It also, if we're good at how we communicate and de-escalating tense situations, it gives the people that we're interacting with a sense of control, and they can regain that self-control. The one thing that I want everybody to remember here, and sometimes people just don't realize it, is that anger is an outward expression of an unmet need. You know, anger is an outward expression of an unmet need. It's a secondary emotion. So people may be cursing at you and you know, having a really bad time with it, but there's something that's driving that behavior. As a communication professional, you have to kind of like look behind the curtain and respond to what's driving the behavior instead of reacting to the words itself. You know, by definition, people are in a vulnerable position when they need help from other people. You know, they're vulnerable, they're embarrassed, they're scared, they're concerned about money, and so on and so forth. When people are in that emotional state, they're more likely to act out. You know, instead of reacting to the words, you have to respond to the meaning that lies behind the words. And all in all, if we are better communicators, you're going to have better outcomes with your clients and as an organization. You'll have higher levels of compliance, cooperation, and collaboration across the board. You'll have less turnover within your work ranks. Your clients that you deal with will be more loyal to your organization. So all around, it's a good deal. So what should the consumer look for? So first is when you're choosing a program, and again, there's many programs out there. You know, verbal judo is one of them. There's CPI, there's MOAB. I can go on and list many others. But when you're looking at the programs, when you're vetting programs, look for programs that are stressing or prioritizing personal or staff safety. You want to make sure that the priority is to keep you safe. We want to make sure that our staff stay safe and they go home every day in the same way that they came to work. We want to make sure that we look for programs that teach people how to identify the conditions when words do not work. So often a lot of programs just talk about, what to say or what to do in the moment, but they don't spend any time talking about, what are the situations where words are not going to work and how are you going to stay safe? If words are not going to work, you need to do something. What are those situations? So any program that that I would recommend, has to spend a little time teaching people how to quickly identify when there's dangerous situation where words are not going to work. We want to choose programs that focus or stress the importance of creating a culture of dignity and respect. And I'm not talking about the respect that Aretha Franklin sings about. I'm talking about professional respect, the respect that we give people because they're breathing the same air that we are. Verbal de-escalation is all about softening resistance and setting the stage so people can do what we're asking them to do. Nobody is going to comply or cooperate or collaborate with you if they feel disrespected. So this concept, this foundational concept of respect is so important. You want to look for a program that helps learners understand where anger and aggression comes from. So instead of just focusing on the words that are coming out of people's mouths, when they're cursing at you or being argumentative or whatever, you have to kind of know what's driving that behavior. You have to understand that anger is an outward expression of an unmet need. And if once you do that and once you understand that, you can respond to what's driving the behavior rather than react to the words that are coming out of their mouths. So it's important to do a little homework there and understand where anger and aggression comes from. And we also want to make sure that you choose a program that help learners identify their own personal triggers and biases. Any verbal de-escalation program, if you don't have this straightened out up here, if you don't have your own housekeeping taken care of, you have little to no hope of controlling what's going on around you. You have to know what your biases are. You have to know what your triggers are. So you want to look for a program that helps learners kind of do a little self-exploration there. We want programs that provide training not only what to do, but how to do it. There's so many programs out there in healthcare in general and verbal de-escalation programs that tell you what to do. But frequently they stop short of telling you or showing you or giving you the opportunity to practice how to do it. So you want to make sure that you're not just getting the what, but you're also getting the how. Nonverbal communication is so important. You can say the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And if you're using the wrong body language and the nonverbals, people are not going to hear your words. They're going to hear what they see. In healthcare in general, I mean, we love our scripts. We have scripts for everything. And I, have a love-hate relationship with scripts because scripts can keep you on task. But if you're not delivering those scripts with authenticity and with the body language that supports that, people are not going to hear what you say. They're going to hear what you do. And we want to always have a program that provides an opportunity or at least stress the need for practice and role play. And last but not least, the programs that are not one and done. I am a big proponent of, I'm very biased towards verbal judo. Verbal judo is what I do. That's what I teach and stuff. But I also encourage my students to always seek out other classes that share the similar information so you can reinforce that behavior. You can reinforce that knowledge. Every time you take a class, you come away with a deeper learning and understanding. What should consumers look out for when they're shopping for a de-escalation program? Any program that professes to be a panacea. Again, people are people-y. People are unpredictable, and you're not going to be able to talk your way out of every situation. There is no magic bullet. And as much as I would love to have it be that, verbal de-escalation is not like Jedi mind tricks. I mean, wouldn't it be lovely just to say you will be nice? It's not that. So any program that professes to be a panacea is a red flag for me, because we need to be able to assess the situation and adapt and so on in order to stay safe. Any program that does not provide an opportunity or at least stress the need for role play and practice. It's good for me to give you information, but if you don't practice it, you're not going to remember it. And if you're interested in getting a program to train some of your own employees to be trainers for your organization, be sure you know the terms of the training and licensing agreement, because sometimes there's limitations there that you may not expect. You want to make sure that whatever program that you go with, they provide post-training support. So once you're licensed to teach in your organization, make sure that you have support from that organization. And is there any hidden costs? There's some programs out there that will charge you for every student that you teach, and every book that you print, and so on and so forth. So be sure that you know about the agreement. Are you going to get the support? And are there any hidden costs? So I just spent a lot of time talking about our propensity to assume that people are good communicators, and how we largely, leave it our safety and our success up to chance. We hope things are going to work out. We also talked about the alarming trend in workplace violence and OSHA's recommendation that we adopt this proactive mindset of the universal precautions for violence as a means to mitigate, workplace violence. And again, and simply stated, it's like we cannot hold ourselves or each other's accountable for a standard that we have not defined or provided the tools and knowledge to succeed. Now, we wouldn't think of doing that with other competencies in our workplace, but we do it with communication all the time. So, with that all being said, my big question, or my big challenge is that how are we going to move away from this sink or swim mentality? How are we going to move away from only providing this type of training after an incident happened and now we're remediating it? We're trying to do cleanup in aisle 5. I would love to be able to have this be something that we provide, this information that we provide our staff when they're coming into the organization, so that when they are thrown into the deep end of the pool, that we at least give them swimmies, if not swimming lessons. So with that, my friends, I thank you very much for the time. And if you have any questions for me, I would love to be able to answer them.
Thank you very much, Latisha, for spending time with us today and sharing this very important information. I'd also like to know if any of our attendees have any comments for you as well.
I would love that.
If not just questions. I am
Comments?
looking in the chat, and it looks like it's all the answers that you asked for earlier in your presentation. Let's give it a minute and see if anybody comes up with anything.
And
in the meantime, I have a question for you. So
Sure.
I'm sure there are, but so I hate to ask it that way, but are there situations that there is not an answer? I mean, someone is so belligerent that they just can't, that verbal judo or whatever, that de-escalation just isn't effective. And is it, generally speaking, is it more when it's some kind of a mental complication?
That's a very good question. Very good. Thank you for that. So one of the things that I think what differentiates verbal judo from some of the other programs, de-escalation programs, is we spend time teaching and talking about when words are not going to work. Sometimes people are just, they're not de-escalatable, right? Yeah. There may not be a situation where we're going to succeed with words. So verbal judo is as much about understanding when words are not going to work and what to do. I mean, based on your training and your role, as it is about using your words. So yes, there are situations where de-escalation is not going to work. Maybe somebody is so severely mentally ill that you do have to put hands on them. You do have to physically or manually restrain them. But that is all very, very dictated by your training and your responsibility and your role in that situation. Going into a home situation, you don't have the support of having security just down the hall. What do you do? What does your policy say that to do if somebody is aggressing against you, right? Yeah, so what verbal judo does, and many verbal de-escalation programs does, it helps lessen the probability that things are going to escalate to the point where people are trying to put hands on you or getting out of control. It helps you gain some control, but there absolutely are situations where words are not going to work. And then, what you do in those situations is dictated by your training and your responsibilities, what your policies and procedures and your SOPs dictate. That was a great question.
Thank you.
I see, how far back do these studies and workplace violence go back? Well, the BLS infographic that I showed goes back to 2011. So that's when they started reporting that information in that way. It's kind of hard. It's kind of scattershot because different organizations will collect information in slightly different way. I like to go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics because it seems to, I like to see my data reported the same way across time. But the BLS data goes back to 2011. The part that is really sad is that, in 2015, the Joint Commission, the Advisory Board, OSHA, there was a lot of focus on workplace violence. But if you look at the statistics or the graphs for, after 2015, the numbers are increasing. And then COVID happened. So I'm really going to be interested in finding out what the impact on COVID has on those numbers. Now, I know that from an anecdotal perspective, we all know what's going to happen, right? We know that it didn't get better over the last 3 years, right?
Right.
But the concerning point, it's not as sad, but it's a concerning point for me is that, all this focus got put on workplace violence in healthcare right around 2015. And JCAHO came out with standards based on CMS and so on and so forth about, having, de-escalation programs and defensive tactic programs. And verbal judo does not teach defensive tactics. We focus on the verbal. But even with all those things being put in place, our numbers are still out of control. So my concern is, and the whole sink or swim and taking a proactive stance is that we need to change the mindset and give this tools to people at the outset instead of waiting until after bad things happen. And the argument that I've gotten from organizations from across the country is that we don't have the resources, it takes too much time, and so on and so forth. And my argument is that you don't have time not to do it. Because when you think about the productivity and the amount of effort that goes into backtracking and remediating, you're putting the time in. So instead of putting the time in after the fact, trying to clean up, and then once the reputational damage happens, it's hard to undo that. Let's put the time and effort and resources before we put people out in the workforce, and doing the jobs. And home care is a public facing, service. I mean, you're in people's homes. How vulnerable can you get as somebody who works in that environment? And then the people who are needing the services are very vulnerable as well. Very good question. Any other questions? Do you see any other?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
And to your point about being proactive, this applies to many different situations I've been in before. And I tell people, you don't wait till the house is on fire to get insurance.
Right. Absolutely.
Because at that point you're scrambling.
Absolutely.
It looks like there is another question that was popped in. Did you see it?
Yep, I see it. It says, it says, I believe you may have covered it, but has there been situations where you are not able to teach these skills to a student versus using these skills to de-escalate the individual? So the funny thing, we have a saying in verbal judo is that you have to use verbal judo to teach verbal judo. So it just becomes the way we communicate with each other and so on and so forth. So there has been situations where I've had students who are quote unquote voluntold to be in the class. They're not willing participants. They were told they had to be there. But typically, and I really can't think of a graphic one where somebody came out at the other end of the training having regretted it, or doing that, I told you so, this was a waste of my time. So, I can only speak from my own personal experience, but so far, I have not been in a situation where the learners who have gone through my class hasn't come out with something that's usable, that they can apply to their interactions. Not to say that other instructors may not have come across it, but so far, and I've been teaching across the country for 2 years, and I've been teaching verbal judo since 2016 in general. And so far, I have not had somebody that was completely unteachable. We teach, people that, how important it is to be empathetic. And I have people saying, well, that, empathy is all this like touchy-feely stuff and so on. But, even with that, we're able to teach people how to come across as being empathetic by teaching them how to paraphrase and so on and so forth. So there's different communication tools that we can use so people who even don't feel like they're touchy-feely can come across as being effective. That's a good question. That's a really good question. So far, knock on wood, it's not been a problem. But I'm sure there's a student out there somewhere that I'm going to have a hard time reaching. Great question.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you so very much. Your information is there on the screen. So if
Yep.
anybody has any other questions, or even when they're watching this after hours, they can reach out to you if need be.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be more than happy. The easiest way to catch me is on the email, because frequently I'm traveling and stuff like that, but I always answer my emails. So if there's a follow-up question, just tell me, you just remind me where you're coming from, that this is from this education session
AZNHA.
here.
Yep.
And then we can go from there. Very
Super.
good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You guys are
So-
awesome.
The AZNHA Board of Directors want to thank you all for participating today. We will not have a monthly education in August due to the conference. We do hope that you are all planning to attend because the speakers and exhibitors are really great this year. And you can access, again, that registration on our website. And watch for the advertising of our September session coming towards the end of August via MailChimp. Be sure you RSVP for that session. Thank you again to everyone and have a great afternoon. And this is a tough one, but try to stay cool. Bye-bye.